Welcome to today's episode of WooNews TV, where we bring spiritual concepts into the mainstream to make them more relatable for you. Today's topic is an introduction to crystals. I'm super excited about today's show. We are going to talk to you about crystals, what they are, how to work with them, how they can help you, and some properties of crystals you might not know about. Welcome my guest, Charles McAlpine from Storm Wisdom. Welcome back, Charles.
Hi, Julie. Thanks for having me again.
To recap, Charles owns a store in the Phoenix, Arizona area called Storm Wisdom. They have crystals, they have gifts, they have practitioners on site that do work remotely as well as in person, and they've created a really wonderful community, not just locally, but nationwide that you can tap into. So all that information will be at the bottom of in the description of the show. So, Charles, I want to talk about crystals. I know they've been around in science some. I think, is it a computer chip they're in? I've always remembered there's some reference to crystals in technology. I just can't recall what it is. So they're around more than we realize.
I think technology is a great example, Julie. Crystals are included in everything: computers, televisions, radios, home appliances, doctors' equipments, and their laboratories and all that sort of thing. And not only that, but like our batteries, for every type of device, whether they're, the Duracell, the car battery, or the lithium battery that powers your phone, those are all mineral and crystal based. And we actually take minerals every day. They're part of our supplements. Our body requires them because we have the same kind of atomic structure in terms of building and repeating patterns and stuff like that. So minerals are such an important part of our daily lives.
I never correlated that with crystals. That's interesting. Tell me about your first experience with crystals. How did you come? I call Charles a crystal keeper. I don't know what he calls himself, but that's what I call him. So tell us about your first experiences with them.
Well, I have to say, the first time I heard about crystals, I was actually in a workshop, and it was a workshop on creating and manifesting your dreams kind of thing, really focused on manifestation. So it wasn't about crystals, but they did introduce them. And as they were explaining them, I just thought to myself, I'm kind of a live and let live kind of guy. And I thought, you know what, that's great. If it works for you, great. It's just not for me. But on the break, when I was in the back of the room, they had a table set up with crystals on them. And I was blown away that these come from the earth. That was the most surprising thing for me. It looked like art. And so I ended up buying several of them for my home. And somehow or other, just making that purchase, all of a sudden, I started seeing them more and I started buying more. But they were more as decoration for my home.
Sure, they were. At least you thought.
Yeah, right. Exactly. But then I think what happened was things started to shift and change so dramatically in my home. I think even if people aren't familiar with the concept of energy and all that sort of thing, they are familiar with how their home feels. And so for me, like at the time, I wouldn't say that I was aware of how strong my intuition was or how aware I was of energy. It's not something I'd focused on. But I remember in particular, I brought in one crystal and almost immediately my dreams started to change. I started to have very time-oriented, three-dimensional, colorful dreams that I could remember. And none of those things usually happen for me at all. So I kept thinking about what is different, what's happening right now. And really the only thing that had changed was this last crystal that I brought into the house. And so I started thinking, I realized I didn't pay attention to him when I first heard about him. So I thought, now I'm going to go back and try to figure out what's going on, because there was definitely an energetic change that was happening, not only to me, but also in the space of my home. The energy.
So you saw a pretty quick difference.
Yeah, I really did. And at the time, I was in the corporate world and I traveled a lot. And so one of the things I started thinking about was that I would look for places where I could learn more about them, take a class or a workshop or something. And everything that I tried basically did not work out. So it was the class was either full, or it was at a time that there's no way I could make it, or it got canceled. And after trying for, a month or 6 weeks, it finally dawned on me, I don't think I'm supposed to learn about crystals from somebody else.
Yeah.
And even as I'd started reading about them, I would be reading something and I'd think, well, no, that's not right. It's more like this. And then, of course, I would question myself because, like, who am I to be saying, it's not like this, it's more like this.
Right.
I had experience with that at all. But that was one of the things that was happening. Just my intuition and insights were just really being amplified. And I don't think that's unique to me. I think if you are paying attention to those kinds of things, anybody can experience that. But I just decided, it's like, okay, well, I won't, I won't learn from other people. I'm going to just trust my own intuition and go with what works for me.
Well, I talk repeatedly about the importance of going within for all information, or at least checking in within when you hear something. So this sounds like the same thing.
And a lot of the material that's written about crystals, I think it's really good, but a lot of them actually recommend crystals for healing very specific illnesses. And I don't really see it that way at all. I think that, like, if somebody had the experience of working with a crystal and it helped them to heal from breast cancer, I think that that's possible, but that doesn't mean that the next person will have the same experience.
Right.
We're all very unique, and so are crystals. And so what works for one person may not work for the next person. So to just kind of prescribe a crystal as a healing treatment didn't really feel right to me, and I didn't want to say something that I couldn't stand behind in terms of teaching a class. And so I just decided to write my own content, and that's really where all the information from the Magic of Crystals comes from. That's our iPhone app and website for crystals.
And we can link that to this information as well. You have an app about all of this?
Yeah, it's only available for iPhones, but we also have a website, which is just www.themagicofcrystals.com, which gives a good oversight of probably about 110 crystals, something like that. Yeah.
Okay, I think this would be a good time for a disclaimer. We are not dispensing medical advice or legal advice in any way. This is strictly for entertainment purposes. So go with what feels right, disregard the rest, use your own judgment and your own discernment.
Right.
And seek professional help when you need it. Okay, let's move on now that we've done that part. So tell us, what do we need to know to get started with crystals?
Actually, you don't need to know anything.
Oh.
And in fact, I think one of the great things about working with crystals is it doesn't have to feel like homework. It can just feel like fun. So if learning about crystals and reading about them and studying their properties is fun for you, then by all means do that. But if it's not fun for you and you just want to go and pick out pretty baubles and gemstone jewelry or whatever feels right to you, I think that's a great way of working with crystals too. I think it was kind of what you were saying earlier about allow your intuition to speak to you a lot, or even your 5 physical senses, right? So if you see something and you're drawn to it, or if you pick something up and it feels good in your hand, or it shifts or changes the taste in your mouth. A lot of times when you're holding onto a crystal, you might get like a metallic taste.
I never knew that. I have a lot of crystals. Wow.
Yeah. And a lot of times what happens is our body gives us subtle clues all the time, right? So, there's lots of ways. And the good news is you can do as much or as little research on crystals as you want to. And I even tell the people that work at Storm Wisdom that they don't have to memorize what all these crystals are. First of all, we have cards there. If you buy a crystal and you want a card to remember why or what you bought it for, or what we think might be good for, it's there. But the pressure of trying to remember these things is I think it's too much pressure. I think it should be fun.
Okay, so let me see if I'm saying this correctly. In this practice of working with crystals, each crystal has its own properties, physical, energetic, etc. And working with them can do various things to support you on your journey of growth and healing and spirituality. And they all relate to different and correlate to different areas and different functions. That's a question, correct?
Right.
Yeah.
So
Go ahead.
well, just to answer that, for me personally, I really, when I work with a crystal, I'm really paying attention to the four energy bodies: spiritual, mental, emotional, and physical.
Okay.
Then below that, I'm really looking at the energy centers of the bodies of the chakras, like where am I sensing or feeling it in the energy centers of the body? And that's really how I begin to be informed about, the properties of the crystals.
Properties meaning their benefits, what they can work with.
Right.
Okay. So give me some examples of some natural properties of crystals.
Well, the way that we have them, the way that it worked out for me was when I was writing about crystals, and I didn't realize this initially because I had to have a kind of a body of work to be able to go back and look at it. But, I started writing about individual crystals, and then what I would do is I would, in a workshop with, 20 to 25 people, I would have them hold the crystal. I would lead them on a guided visualization with that crystal, and then have them describe their experience of the crystal in this meditation. And 99.9% of the time, what they were experiencing with the crystal is the same thing that I experienced with the crystal. And that's kind of how I was vetting it. And you would think that and so I thought it was always important to do 2 or 3 crystals in one class. That way they would see that the experience they had in meditating with
different, yeah.
crystals would be different. So, so to recap what I said earlier, I think that there are some basic properties that crystals have. So if you think about crystals being like humans, right? And I'm not saying that they are like humans, but, as a group, we have some basic overlapping tendencies or properties or whatever. You could separate out different groups and you say, okay, this group is good at, math, and this group is good at this. And, that's the same way with crystals. I think that there are basically some real general properties that they'll have. So like most black crystals tend to feel very grounding. I think the color I think the color has a lot to do with that. Black is a very grounding color, just like red is. A lot of times they absorb dense energies that are no longer needed or required. So you think about charcoal and filtering water through it or whatever, it kind of absorbs the particles and clarifies the water and stuff like that. I think a lot of black crystals, people are drawn to them when they're looking to do any kind of clearing work or they're looking for additional clarity. Purple stones like amethyst or lepidolite or charoite, they're good for connecting with your higher guidance because they're more associated with the crown energy center. So there are those kinds of properties, right? So
I'm assuming, I want to talk to the audience that might not know anything about this as well. So these basics are good.
Yeah. So, there will always be exceptions to the rule, but I think that there are some general things. So what I did was, after I'd written about, probably 50 of these things or whatever, and I started thinking about putting them in the app, I started thinking that it would be, was there a way to narrow this down? So I think on the app, there are 14 different properties that we use, and I don't have them all memorized, but grounding, clearing, clarity, self-awareness, higher guidance.
It's calming, or is that would be grounding?
I think that would be grounding. Whenever I feel grounded, I feel calmer.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah. So
what are some other categories you can recall?
Manifestation. Oh, and vitality. I think that there are some crystals that energetically give us a lift in our actual energy and stuff like
Oh,
that.
nice.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
for those watching that might not be meditators or might be new to meditation, do you have to meditate with the crystal in order to get benefits from it? It sounds like no, because you had them all over your house and all these things were happening.
Actually, I think it's really very simple. So one of the things is I don't think there are a lot of rules about working with crystals,
Okay.
but I do think that they're great talismans for holding our intentions. Like what is it we're trying to create? So if you walk into a store and you see an amethyst and you're really drawn to it because you like the color of it or whatever, and it probably triggers a memory for you. It probably triggers an emotion. It probably triggers a thought. And your decision to purchase it is the beginning of that, the beginning foundation of that intention. Like, I like this because it's beautiful. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm bringing more beauty into my life.
Okay.
This
That's
color,
simple.
yeah, yeah. And this color, um, purple, reminds me of um, my favorite sweater. So I always feel good when I'm wearing the sweater.
Mm-hmm.
There, we make these subconscious associations with them, and I think that's the beginning foundation of setting an intention with the crystal, right? Even if you're not aware of it, well, then you bring it home, and every time you see it or touch it, you're basically reconnecting with that intention. And our subconscious mind is powerful. It doesn't miss a thing. So even though, you walk through your front door and you're not paying any attention to the crystal that's sitting on your coffee table, your subconscious mind remembers. It's like, oh
Right.
yeah,
It knows it's there.
right. I got this crystal because it brings beauty into my home and it makes me feel good.
I
So
have some shungite. I don't see it right now. Little pyramids around my bed and my computer and all of that. I want you to explain what that does
what it does for you or what it does in general?
in general.
Yeah, shungite is
Because
very
AI is
popular.
a big deal right now. It's just more and more AI out there. And
Yeah, yeah. And shungite is a really good stone for what we talked about before when we were talking about the black stone. So in terms of cleansing and clearing, and also for grounding. And I think with shungite, one of the things about it is it's got so much carbon in it that they're actually using it to filter water and all kinds of things, and diffuse EMF energies. So I mean, our bodies create EMFs; they're all around us. But we certainly even live in a time where there's so much more electronic interference.
Wi-Fi, and
Right,
I
right.
have a little crystal here on the back, a shungite on the back of my phone.
Right, right. And so what I would say is, uh, it's such a part of an environment that a lot of people don't realize that may be what is, that it might be having an effect on them. And the effect could be as simple as feeling a little more scattered because, when you're in a particular area because you're being bombarded with EMFs. So the shungite would help to ground that. And for a lot of people, when they put those discs on their phone or those pieces of shungite on their phone, they instantly feel a difference in how their phone feels in their hand. I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
that dramatic for them. So
Okay, let's walk people through a process. I decide to go to your store and don't know what, I don't have any intention in mind at that time. I'm drawn to this particular crystal, this stone. It's pretty, I just walk right to it. So I decide to buy one. Then what do I do? I take it home, and what do I do with it?
well, generally speaking, I think what happens is crystals go where they want to go, and I don't mean to make it sound like they're making a choice, right? But somehow or other, like I got this beautiful piece of selenite at the store, and it was somebody had come in and said, are you interested in buying this? And I said, I don't know, bring it in and show it to me. He brought it in, and I thought, not only am I interested in buying it, but I'm interested in taking it home.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wasn't really sure where it was going to go, but I brought it home and I set it on my kitchen counter, and it has never moved.
Okay, so you bring it home and you just put it wherever you kind of
Yeah,
feel like putting it.
right.
You have to
And what
clean it. You have to prepare it in some way.
well, there are all sorts of things that you can do, right? And I think that you know
For
this is
people that don't trust their own knowledge, is there something you can recommend, or is it really not that black and white?
well, I think that well, so there's a lot, and like so even in our course we cover like cleansing and clearing crystals,
Mhm.
and we cover activating them and all that. I want to say that I believe that most of these crystals are millions of years old, and they don't need the cleansing and clearing as much as we need the cleansing and clearing. Like we need to go through that thing to create our own bond and our own connection to it.
Okay.
So
Okay.
like for example, we actually go through the store, two times a month, three times a month, and sage the entire place. And the intention is to sage the crystals as well. To if there's anything that's there, any old energies that are no longer needed or required, to just kind of move them out and move them
Mhm.
along. So sage or some people put their crystals out in the moonlight. If you live in Phoenix, you don't want to ever put them out in the sun because the
Mhm.
sun is so brutal here. Not
Right.
only can it, like if it's a clear crystal like quartz, it could actually start a fire if it has a prism effect, right? But also, a lot of them, it'll just fade the color right out of them because it's so intense or whatever.
Okay.
But I have a friend who makes beautiful high end jewelry in New York, and after she's done making a piece, she always puts it in the freezer overnight because that's her favorite way of clearing the crystals.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Okay, so I have my crystal, I bring it home, I put it where I feel drawn to putting it, and then I can meditate with it, I can put it under my pillow and sleep with it under my pillow at night, I can stick it in my bra, I can put it in my pocket, any of these things
oh yeah,
to
yeah,
receive the benefits and the properties of that particular stone.
yeah. So if you are wearing or carrying a crystal with you, then it's part of your energy field, and I'm sure you've explained to your guests many times before. But we're more than just our physical
Yes,
body.
everything is energy.
Right. So
Yeah.
we have an emotional energy body, we have a mental energy body, we have a spiritual energy body. And depending upon what's going on for us, that can be, that could take up anywhere from a few inches from our body to, many, many feet or whatever, right? So if you're wearing or carrying a crystal with you, then your body assumes it has access to those properties. It has
Oh,
access to
okay.
whatever the crystal is offering. So just like if you were to take it as a mineral supplement in the morning, right? So I tell people like the difference between the way that I tend to work with crystals most is I tend to just hold them for a little while I'm having coffee in the morning. So I'm
Mhm.
one of those people who I would love to have a wonderful meditation practice, but that's really hard for me. Uh, so instead, what I do is I usually have a few crystals just sitting on the table next to where I have coffee every morning. And while I'm sitting there having my coffee, I just tend to pick up one of the crystals and hold it, and as a
Mhm.
result of the palms of your hand being such a strong meridian for the rest of your body, the rest of the energy centers in your body, I'm just getting infused with that energy. I put it
Right.
down and it stays with me for some time for the rest of the day, or sometimes it's much longer, or sometimes it might only be a few hours and then something happens and maybe you know my energy shifts or changes. But if you're wearing it, it's almost like having a time release vitamin that's
Mhm.
constantly kind of feeding your system or something like that. So
Again, this is not medical advice, but yes, I
yeah,
understand.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm not trying to say that it's time release, but just like it isn't,
Constant stream of that energy coming into
right.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So for me, we have crystals around the house, some intentional, some just where they felt like being put. I have them near my bed, I have them on my desk. For years, if I needed the energy from a particular one, I would put it under my pillow. Sometimes I would, especially if going through a really difficult emotional time or grief, I would sleep with one on my hand
Hmm.
a lot of times. put in my bra. I just told a girlfriend to start doing that, and it was new for her, but she started doing it.
Yeah.
Put them in your pockets. I always have one in my carry-on bag when I travel. I have black tourmaline every time I travel.
Yeah.
So
I
just
tell people,
I don't
I tell,
sit and meditate with them either. I just,
right.
I'm kind of like you in that regard, but I'm just touching them. I'm always seem to be touching them.
Yeah. I tell people when they fly, they should probably have a piece of citrine with them, because citrine is one of those, the black tourmaline is good for safety and security, stability, that whole sense of uh, connection to where you're going. So you're sure-footed in your travels and stuff like that. But citrine is a great crystal because it almost acts as like a shield to other people's energies. And so when you're on flying through the air in a tin can with 200 people, you don't need to take on any of their energy. It's like, you're not trying to be engaged with them and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
So
like, no.
yeah, it's like, yeah, no, that's not mine. Yeah, no, that's not mine. So yeah,
Okay, I'll remember that next time I travel. I'll do the citrine.
Yeah.
Let's talk about two or three basic crystals that people can start with, or good ones to start with in your toolkit, ones that anybody can use, that are pretty multifunctional.
Well, so the first one, I have a clear quartz here. Can you see this?
Oh, wow, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
I want to remember to ask you if the shape has an impact on some things.
Sure. So let's do the first, the three crystals first. The clear quartz is probably the grandfather of all crystals. It's the one that's used in a lot of technology. As a matter of fact, the US government used to be the largest collector of crystals until they figured out how to grow them in their own lab. So that was, probably in the 40s that they were able to start growing them. And then they had to get rid of millions of pounds of surplus crystals that they had in storage for years, because they need it for so many different technologies, right?
And they come in all different sizes. Naturally, they come in all different sizes, teeny tiny ones and really, really big ones.
Yeah.
And yours is just larger.
Right. And so for the government, they really needed them to be as clear as possible, because you don't want the inclusions, and you don't want other minerals and stuff like that. All of that affects the quality of, what happens with quartz crystal, and this is true for a number of other crystals too, but when you apply pressure or heat to it, it actually starts moving energy. And that's not a metaphysical thing, that's a physics thing. It's like, that's why it works in technology. So you apply pressure to it or you apply heat to it, it starts an energy frequency movement, and then it usually will keep that energy moving for a long period of time. So quartz watch, right? It doesn't, you apply pressure to it, it signals, and it just repeats itself for a long time. That's kind of how it works.
One more way science is proving to us that everything is energy.
Right. Yeah. So quartz is kind of known for not only generating and amplifying its own energy, but it's also one of the crystals that is used in a lot of memory chips, because it has the ability to hold memory, right? And so that means that it's really good for setting your intentions. Because it then amplifies whatever it is that you're intending with it.
Okay, give me an example. I have a quartz crystal, and I stated intention into the crystal, or with holding the crystal, and then what?
Well, then just
your way.
Yeah, you could carry it, you could wear it, or you could just leave it in the environment wherever you want it to be, right?
And it's holding that intention.
It's holding that intention until you want it to do something else. And remember, it's holding that intention, but you're subconsciously connecting to that intention every time you see that crystal.
Okay, so you're literally programming it with that intention, and your subconscious is connecting to it no matter what you're doing or where you are.
Right. And so it's I have a YouTube video on working with generators, which is the shape of this one that I just showed you, and wands. But I want to, can I do a little quick demonstration here?
Sure.
Okay. So this crystal,
more detailed I think we can be, more helpful it'll be for people.
Okay. So for this particular crystal, when I got it, I would always sit with the crystal, and when I brought it home, and I might do the, I would probably go through a cleansing and clearing process, and I wouldn't make that real hard or anything. I would just hold it, and I would say, okay, I just want this crystal to be clear, and there's a reason that we're together. What's that reason, right? And so I would kind of sit and just think about, okay, why is this crystal here for me? Now, you can read what other people think the crystal is for and all that kind of stuff. What I think the crystals are for, you can read all of that, but really, it's what's it for you, right? And so when I got this particular crystal, one of the things that started happening was I started having kind of flashback of old memories and stuff like that, like childhood memories and things like that. I just started, I realized that my mind was kind of going backwards. And so I just thought, okay, so this is really about, working with and healing any past issues that might be going on for me or whatever. Okay. And so I just thought, okay, well, that's what I would really like for this to do. So
it was bringing up memories for you to recognize and release and heal.
Right, exactly. And so instead of changing the intention of the crystal, because to me, that seems like that's what the crystal was automatically doing for me. I just thought, okay, if I'm going to set an intention for this crystal to work with me in the past, then what does that really mean to me? So the first thing I would think is, as a kid, when you have a traumatic experience, you don't necessarily have the intellectual capacity to put it into a life lesson. You can't say, oh, the reason that I got this spanking was because this, and this is how it's going to serve me later in life, right? When we're older, we have these experiences, and we can find the lesson in that, even if it's an uncomfortable one, right? Or a really positive experience is the same thing. So for me, it was kind of like, if I'm going to have this crystal and it's going to be focused on the past, then I'm going to just, on the face of this crystal, I'm just going to say, okay, well, I'd really like to take any old childhood issues that come up, anything that's ready for healing and to be released.
And you're rubbing this crystal as you're doing it. You can't see the crystal.
I'm rubbing the front face of it, right? I'm just rubbing this face. There's 6 sides to a crystal. I'm rubbing the face. I'm just like, okay, I want to be able to get the life lessons out of any experience that's coming up that's ready for release. And then if there's something else, then I might change to the next phase and say, okay, if this is going to be working on past issues for me, I want to remember all the positive things that happened in my childhood that really affected and shaped who I am too. So you would just break this down. If it was a relationship crystal that you were working on, you might say, I'm looking for, somebody that's compatible, somebody that's sexy, somebody that is, funny, trustworthy, and just put that into the face. And what you're doing is you're clarifying in your own mind what that intention means to you.
Okay. So if not everyone is aware of how tuned in they are to crystals, perhaps as you are. So if they're not yet in that space yet, they can do what you're doing with whatever intention that they want to work on. But it sounds like your crystal was speaking to you initially of what it was going to help you with, and you were able to connect to that and get that information. But if someone isn't comfortable with that, if they don't trust themselves yet to do that, then they can just do what you're talking about with whatever intention that they want to create.
Yeah, you could say, okay, I want this crystal to help me to find the right next position, the right next job, right? And then it's like, okay, well, that's pretty vague, right? It's a job, but it's like, what do you want the job to be?
And you can go around maybe all the sides of the crystals and rub it and put more details of the intention in.
Right. And so what happens is you're clarifying your intentions, and the crystal is then holding that as a talisman for you to get that done. But the more you can get specific and you can put that in there, not only are you getting specific, but then you're telling the crystal what it means. When you then connect with it again, you have that internal memory of what this crystal represents.
It's always coming, the energy is always coming into your field then.
Right.
And you're projecting it out there.
Right. And so either you're wearing it and carrying it around with you, right? Because that's what you're trying to do, or it's in your home and you're reminded whenever you're in that space that that's what you're trying to do.
Okay.
So I say the same thing. Like, for example, if you're using a crystal to do something with work, like for you, if you wanted to use a crystal to shift or change the energy of what it is that you're doing here, I would put the crystal near where you're working. If you're trying to change something in your family dynamics, you put it in the kitchen or the family room. If you're trying to change the way you sleep or the intimacy in your bedroom, you put it in the bedroom. It's kind of like put it where it can do the best work, because when you're in the kitchen, you're going to remember that. When you're in the family room, when you're in the bedroom, when you're in the office, right?
Okay.
And what you will find, I think, and I bet you this has already happened to you many times, but what happens for me is all of a sudden I'll think, oh, I want to change something around. And really what I've done is moved crystals to a different location in the house. It's like, okay, they're ready to do something else now, or to ready to have a different act or something. So, yeah.
Okay, so that's quartz crystals.
Yeah. The next one I would recommend would be like black tourmaline or the shungite that you have.
You guys can see this.
Yeah, so these are going to be very similar in terms of they're going to be grounding. They're going to help clear away anything that's no longer needed, is no longer necessary. They're going to help you feel more sure-footed and like you're headed in the right direction. Like that's, it works really well, or very, it's very strong for the root energy center of the body, which is really about safety and security, knowing that you're seated comfortably, or that your feet are firmly planted and stuff like that. So that's another good one. And shungite would be the same thing. The last one that I would recommend, if you were just going to have three, would probably be selenite.
Okay, let me hold up my selenite here. Here we go. Here's a big selenite. Oops.
Yeah. And so selenite is really good for breaking up blockages. And it doesn't matter whether it's physical, emotional, mental, or spiritual. It breaks up any stuck energies and helps to disperse it. As a matter of fact, it's one of the crystals that a lot of people use, including us, to cleanse and clear other crystals. Because just like you take your piece of jewelry off at night and you set it on the crystal, it's just going to cleanse and clear and break up anything that's no longer yours, that feels blocked or stuck. I actually have a selenite pillow that's on my nightstand, and in the middle of the night, if I wake and I have a headache or sore throat, or my knee or lower back is aching, wherever it is, I put that selenite pillow right there. So like if it was a sore throat, I would just put it right here. And when I wake up in the morning, most of the time that's gone, and I don't even remember that I've done it until I find the selenite pillow in the bed. So you
sell those at the store? I've never seen.
I'm going to say we did, but we sold out of them.
I would love one of those.
Yeah, no, they're amazing. As a matter of fact, when I travel, I take it with me, because that's what I would use instead of, like, I try not to take things like aspirin or ibuprofen and stuff unless I really need to. Instead, I'll just sit with it on my forehead for 15 or 20 minutes, and usually that'll take care of it or whatever. So I travel with mine, because it's kind of like taking my aspirin with me or whatever. So
I'm going to be on a hunt for a selenite pillow. Okay, let me see what we haven't covered on our list. So how to select your crystals? You go to what you're drawn to.
Yeah.
Or you go by some of the properties you might be familiar with that particular crystal, if that's something you're seeking.
Right. Okay. I would say that there are four primary ways that people buy crystals, at least when they come into Storm Wisdom. Sometimes they come into Storm Wisdom because they hear that we carry a lot of local art or locally made jewelry. And so they come in, and then all of a sudden they are drawn to a crystal, and they just buy it because they like the look of it. It's no different than going clothes shopping. It's like, oh, I like this one. Right.
And it fits.
Right. Exactly.
It always fits.
And the other would be that they're looking for something specific, like they are dealing with a situation and they want a crystal that could help them with that. Another one is that they come in because they've already been told a crystal, either they read it in a book someplace or a friend referred them and said, oh, you should go get this kind of crystal. And what's the fourth one? I'm drawing a blank. I can't remember what the fourth one was, but there's 3 or 4 different ways that people will come in and normally buy crystals. And like I said, I don't, the good thing is, if you don't know what the properties are, you don't know what the name of the crystals are, it doesn't really matter. You can just trust intuition about that. So,
and like you said early on, even if you buy it just because it's pretty, you're still receiving benefits from it.
Yeah. And because you've made a connection. And I do think, like, I'm such a believer in energy, right? I'm such a believer that everything has energy. So like the artwork that you choose for your home, the artwork that is behind you right now is something that you were drawn to. There's something about those colors. There's something about that.
My cousin painted it for me.
Yeah. I was going to say, so the familial relationship, right? There's something about that. You put that on your wall, that is going to feel very different from another piece of art, right? Mm-hmm. So everything has energy. I think the difference with crystals is that they actually, they grow. They're living in that they're repeating atomic structures, and they're so much a part of our body. They make up so much of who we are that we actually have a stronger resonance with them than a lot of inanimate objects that we could use. You could use a stuffed animal. You could use anything. You could use a wooden talking stick. You could use whatever you want. But I do think that, and this is true for me personally, is that because of their energy and their frequency, it's very aligned with us, I think. So, and interestingly enough, is that you won't be drawn to all crystals. And that's the other thing, is like, make it easy on yourself. Do you remember there used to be a place here in town called Chakra 4, which was a tea and tincture restaurant. It was down on Camelback. And somebody told me about it. It's not there anymore, but I went down to look at it, and I went in, and they had all these teas and herbs in jars all over the walls, right? And as I went in, I kind of was overwhelmed. I was like, okay, what do I do? Where, I don't know, it's like, I wouldn't mind having a cup of tea, but how do I choose when there's 1,000 of them here? And in that moment, I thought to myself, oh, this is what happens when people come into Storm Wisdom, right? There are hundreds of different varieties of crystals in there. And if you're trying to figure it out, all of a sudden I realize it's like, okay, I don't have to figure this out. What am I drawn to? Where do I want to go?
I want people to really hear that. It's very simple.
Yeah, it really is. It's like, oh, okay. Well, this is kind of cool. And it's like, I wonder what this is. And does this long, spike or blade of grass, is that the same thing as this leaf over here? It's like, I want to know more about this, the thing that's shaped like a stick of grass, or, leaves of grass or something, instead of blade of grass, not leaf of grass. But, so just go with what you're drawn to. Just go with what catches your eye, that sort of thing. And I can't tell you how many times I've gone into a crystal store or a gem show or whatever, and been looking around and then realized that I've been carrying the same crystal for 15 minutes. Like, I think I'm picking them up and putting them down and all that kind of stuff. And that may be true, but I've got this one in my hand that I've been carrying all along. And then it's like, duh, just buy the crystal.
So don't make it so hard. Okay, no. So to recap, the 3 you're recommending, if you're not sure, a good place to start to have in your collection is the quartz crystal, the
black tourmaline or shungite,
and finally selenite. All right. Anything else you want to say to our audience before we sign off on this topic?
Well, so all of this is covered in our online course, but one of the things that you mentioned is, does the shape of a crystal affect the way it feels, the energy of it? And I really do think it does. So for example, this one here, the way it's shaped, and this is fairly a big piece, but this is called a generator. And what happens is it has a natural A axis and C axis inside the crystal, the way that the crystal grows, right? And so the energy wants to move in the direction that it's growing. And so it would come up and out through the top. So I say to people, if you think of it like a light, like a small handheld wand that is pointed like this that you can hold in your hand, a lot of times those will feel like a laser, where this will probably feel like more like a flashlight. Where if it's a sphere, it's going to feel more like a radiant light bulb.
And what about something like this?
It's going to be more like a spotlight kind of going off in multiple directions.
Just dispersing it around?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Or think of it like a flame on a fire. You know how a fire kind of flickers and, burning and stuff like that. So it's going to do whatever, it'll get your attention, but it's not necessarily always going to look and feel the same. That's just how the light of like a cluster or something like that will work.
Okay.
Yeah.
This was so fun.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
all this information, the course information, the information for the app, the iPhone app, please send that to me, will be in the description, and also the links to Storm Wisdom itself and all kinds of good information. So be sure to look for that so you can refer to a little bit more about what we're talking about here. Oh, and the Magic of Crystals, that website.
Yes.
Yeah, it'll all be in the description. So thank you so much again, Charles.
It was great being with you again, Julie. Thank you.
And I'm going to think of something else to have you back on for.
Sounds good.
Thanks so much.